Today we are moving on from callbacks to promises. And you know what the promise means. I will do it. Okay, that's what promise means. I will do it. I promise you. And at one point, the promise is happening and then it's completed. Okay, or failed. Sometimes you don't hold your promise. So we're going to look at how to write those in here. So I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to write const my promise, and I will also tell you some of these words are mandatory to use. For example, this new promise. Okay, we're going to create a new promise here. And what we'll do is we're going to use an arrow function. And the same in here. Here goes the logic. Okay. Now the promise takes two arguments. It takes resolve and it takes reject. Okay. So either resolve the promise or you reject the promise. You complete it or you don't. So then we created a variable here. You can choose any variable, and this is going to be a boolean, and I'm going to set it to true. Great. Now if true, then something will happen, else something else will happen. Okay, so if it's true, we can say it's resolved. Yeah, and in that case, we can say operation was successful. Otherwise, we reject it, and we can say operation failed. Now, let's see how we can get this data out. So let's call this function, and instead of using these brackets down, we're going to say then and catch. Then, and in here we're going to put an arrow function with some logic. And otherwise we do catch. And in there, an arrow function with some logic. So what happens then? We can say here, we're going to send a message through here. We can use any word here. And then we can console log the message. And here then we will do an error. So if it's not successful, we will get an error, and in that case we will console log the error, like so. Let's recap this. I've created a variable here called my promise, and it has a function attached to it, and in here it creates a new promise which we will resolve or reject. The logic goes in here. We create a variable true, so we say the logic here then, if it's true we resolve it, otherwise we reject it. Then we will call this function, and we can then say if it's true, then we get this message. If there's an error, we do this. Let's run this. And you can see it says operation successful. Now let's say if we can get this message logged here. So we say false, then this is not true, so we should get this one. Let's try. And it says operation failed. Great. What if we have an error? So I say false C, for example. Then it should catch the error and console log it. So I could even say error. Let's see if that also works. And say here, error, reference error, false C is not defined. Let's try with another one. I will mark this out. Here we go. So in this promise here, we created a promise right here that we worked with. This time I want to fetch something from the internet through an API. There are different websites here. I found one here these are open APIs, no authentication needed. And I would like to use this one here, advice slip, and where it comes with advices. Okay, so I want to be able to log the advice based on an ID that I send in. So let's have a look at how to do this. So I'm going to create a function here, and I'm going to call this fetch advice by IDs. I do camel casing, and an arrow function there, and in here will go the logic, and then later on I want to be able to call this function with, for example, a number, let's say 10. Okay, I'll just put 10 in there for now. We can change that, and that will go in here. So let's have a look here. We're going to fetch, and I'm just going to find the IP address and paste it in there. Okay, here's the website, and then what I can do, for example, I can say 12, and then I get the advice. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to copy this part here, this first part there, and in here then I have to use backticks, stick this in there, and then in here I will put the ID, so based on the number. So that's my fetch, and I can show you that this is a promise. Let's say promise, and then we can console log the promise. Let's do that down here. Let's move myself out of the way. Yeah, you can see promise pending. So it's a promise. So what we can do, we say then, just like here, with the response we get, now let's see, we get a promise, and then if we get a response, then we can do something. So let's actually console log the response and see what we get. So what you see here is we get quite a bit of information. Okay, in this case we even get the URL, and we also get an OK, a boolean. Let's work with that one. So what we will do here is, actually I'm going to take that away, and take this away. We will say if the response dot okay. So if this is false, this is now true. So we put exclamation mark. If this is false, then we want to throw a new error. And the error should say network response was not okay. And otherwise, we can return the response.json. And let's chain onwards here. Then we can say, with the data that we receive, and again, you can call this anything you like. Let's create a new variable. We call this advice. Actually, let's console log the data we're getting. Let's console log what we're getting here. So we see this here. We're getting this back. So we can play with that. We can say const advice equals, and then we're going to say data dot, and we can dig in slip. We see slip standing right here. Slip dot, and we want the advice there. And now we could console log. And let's do it with backticks here. Advice and we can say ID, and because we're using the backticks here, we can use this here to get in the ID that we had. And in here then we can add the advice there. Okay, let's check this again. So we have here advice, what we wrote here, ID, never pay full price for a sofa at DFS. I don't know what DFS is. It's probably an American company. I don't know, maybe you know. Okay, so that works so far. And of course we need to catch the error too. Catch. And again we can do it like that. And then error as the argument. And in here then we can say console.error. And in here you can say error fetching advice, and we add the error there. Now you don't want these semicolons in there because we're not finished yet. So there we go. So everything still works. Let's say if we do an ID, I don't know, maybe 1,000, maybe that doesn't exist. Yeah, so it's too high. Would one work? Yes, remember that spiders are more afraid of you than you are of them. So let's recap this. We're calling this function here, adding an argument here. Number one, it's fetching from this address here, number one. Then we looked here, the response, returning a promise. This is returning a promise. And then with the response, if it's not okay, it says network response was not okay, but otherwise return the JSON please from the response. Then with a JSON, the data, we say this variable here equals data.slip.advice. We saw that, and we console log that. And then at the end there's a catch. So if there's an error, we console log the error. Now we also want to add the TypeScript to this code. As you can see, this was a JavaScript from the beginning, and now we're going to add some TypeScript here. I'm just going to take this back here because I want to check what kind of data we were getting. So I'm going to run this code again here, and this is what I'm going to use here at the top. So I'm going to say type, and this is my advice response. And we are going to get in here an object, so slip. So I'm following this. This here is going to be the same, yeah? So slip. I have an ID, which we can see is a number. And we have an advice, which is a string. There. Okay. Now I can take away the console log. Now I can clear this. Okay, so I needed that, and I will need that in my TypeScript here. So first of all, I have the ID, which is a number, which I've already done. Then this promise here, this variable here, let's hover over it. This is of type promise. So I'm going to say promise, and it also said, does it still say it? Let me take it away so you can see. Here, I'll just copy it. Of type promise, returning a void. There. Then we're going down. Here it says any, but when I hover over it, you can see it's of type response. So copy that. And then we get to this part here. Let's have a look what it is. You can see that this is still a response. It's a response actually. So I can say as promise, but it has the advice response JSON in it. So we can do it like that. Okay. So we use this as here. We don't want to do the colon because we're not returning anything here. But we're going to see here as promise advice response, because this promise here resolves to an advice response here. So here then what we can do is we can unwrap the promise and work with the actual advice response. So that's what we're going to do now. So we get in here, and then the data we're getting is actually going to be of type advice response there. And then we have this here, and this advice you can see is a string there. And then we have the error here, and when we do a catch error in a promise, we should write down unknown, because we don't know what kind of error it's getting back. So in here we're going to say unknown, and now I think our TypeScript is done. Yes, let's try if everything still works. Yes. So that was a lesson on promises, and after this we'll move on to async and awaits, asynchronous programming. Now, homework.